101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She is a clinical psychologist, perfectionism coach, and of course, an author too. No other than Dr. Tara Cousineau. Welcome back, Dr.
Oh, yeah.
Tara.
Thanks for having me, Danielle.
Yes, welcome back. And can you please introduce again about more about yourself?
Okay. Yeah, I'm a clinical psychologist. I've been working for many years with clients, mostly around, self esteem, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, trying to teach mindfulness and self compassion and those kinds of things. And that's my area.
Yes, and Dr. Tara, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And today, let's talk about your debut book, The Kindness Cure: How the Science of Compassion Can Heal Your Heart and Your World. What inspired you to write this book, and how do you define kindness in your work?
Okay. So The Kindness Cure is my first book, my debut book, and I was inspired really by what was happening in the world, although I can say that it still continues, where
Yes.
just very hateful discourse, a lot of discontent, people being mean to each other. And my daughters were teenagers at the time, and there was just a lot of difficulties. And there weren't very many good role models out in the world either, or it was just harder to find. And so, really, what inspired it is my daughter actually had gotten beaten up by another girl, a mean girl kind of fight, totally unexpected. And it just, she was okay, but very startled and disturbed by this event happening. And the school couldn't do a whole lot of it, a lot around it, because it was off school grounds. And I said, like, what happened to kindness? Like, where is it in the world? And as a researcher, I thought, I'm just going to go see what the research tells us. That is there something more that ancient wisdom might, like, does the science tell us anything more? And so I just went on this little quest to see, is kindness good for healing, and what do we know about it? And that's how that this all started.
How does the science of compassion differ from general ideas about being nice?
Well, I think one of the positive things about newer technologies, look at the upside of the newer technologies,
Yes.
with brain imaging scans and being able to do, sensor research on the body, is that we do know that when you are practicing self-compassion and mindfulness, that changes start to happen internally on, the inner physical areas. Your gray matter gets thicker, meaning it's speedier, it can connect easier. There's this sort of bridge in the brain between the limbic system and the executive functions. And when we practice mindful self compassion, loving kindness meditation, mini meditation practices, there's sustainable benefits over time if you practice these things regularly. And so, one of the things I just really gravitated to is like, listen, being kind actually changes your inner networks, the neural networks in your brain. And it's like learning anything new, is that we need to practice being kind to each other and to ourselves, because it has physiological benefits. So I really just wanted to draw attention to that. So my definition of kindness, going back to what you first asked, is that kindness is love in action. And it really requires this intentional effort to be kind. And that can be expressed in so many different ways. But if we don't pay attention to it, we're less likely to engage in kind behaviors.
Dr. Tara, what is the most surprising research finding about kindness that you share in the book?
One of the things that I thought was fascinating actually is that the the empathy networks in the brain are
Yes.
similar to the networks with physical pain. So when we're confronted with suffering of others, our loved ones out in the world, we're actually experiencing the same activation as if we were being inflicted with pain. I found that incredibly interesting and important because we need to kind of negotiate not being consumed by that pain and that distress. We have to learn how to move through it. And that's where the skills in the Kindness Cure book, there's 28 chapters, there's a little skill in every chapter, helps us to learn how to regulate our emotions so that we can be calm. And when we're calm, it is much easier to be kinder to others and to ourselves.
Dr. Tara, let's talk about the personal transformation. How can kindness genuinely heal emotional pain or trauma, as your title suggests?
Well, I think one of the things that we know is that we actually all harbor an instinct for compassion and kindness. If we didn't, we wouldn't have survived as a species. We tend to think we need to survive by being aggressive and assertive and acquiring all of these resources, that we're really trying to optimize our survival. But honestly, we wouldn't survive if we didn't have the connections and the bonds with other people. So focusing on bonds and connections with other people is actually really important for our survival, and we need to just practice it more often.
Dr. Tara, how do you respond to skeptics who say kindness is too soft to create real change?
Can you repeat that question?
How do you respond to skeptics who say kindness is too soft to create a real change?
Yeah, that's a common one. It's the same thing with self-compassion, where people think that when you turn towards yourself with caring and understanding, that you could be letting yourself off the hook, that it's not active enough. It's a soft skill when harder skills are valued more. It's just simply wrong,
Mm,
honestly. And
yes.
it kind of goes against. I mean, I feel like we're just marketed that we have, no pain, no gain, that we have to be tough, that we have to constantly strive and achieve at the expense of doing the things that really matter in life, which we know are actually relationships, because relationships are what connect. And this is how we can offset so many things, including anxiety, depression, the loneliness epidemic, you name it, interpersonal conflicts, world conflicts. If we could actually approach it from the space of, um, you are as important as I am in this world. How can we come together and have a conversation that is respectful, inclusive, and caring?
What is personal or what, yes, what's personal story from your life where kindness given and receive become a turning point?
For me personally, oh my gosh, I feel like there are so many examples. um, I'm thinking of, a few years ago. This is after I actually wrote the book, but I had fallen on my way to work. I just like tripped. Like I was listening to a meditation. I just completely, fell and I broke my foot. And I had to, basically hobble myself to a clinic, and, someone took my bag. They got me a wheelchair. It wasn't even a medical professional. It was just somebody in the hallway, like, "Oh, let me help you." I mean, these are the little tiny acts, and they actually really matter.
Yes.
So, and the research shows this too, even in the workplace, that the small things like sending a very specific thank you, um, getting a cup of water or a cup of coffee for someone actually makes a difference. Um, uh, uh, Acknowledging that people have done something generous or kind and kind of shouting it out loud, that these small measures actually enhance coherence at work. Now, it also helps to do this in families too, because we'll be less kind to the people we love the most sometimes.
Yes.
Right? So we also have to reorient our attention to to generosity. One of the things I write about in the book is also that we just have this tendency that none of us can help, and that's the negativity bias. So our brain is always kind of focused on what could possibly go wrong, or the danger that's out there in the world, or the complaints or the gripes, right? If you come home and sit at the table with your family, you'll hear about everything that's going wrong as opposed to the things that are going right. So we need to shift our attention to the things that are going well in the world. And when that happens, it has a ripple effect. Everything has a ripple effect. So it could be for the positive, or it could be for the negative. So the negative ripple effect is much quicker because we catastrophize and we're really primed for danger than the positive ripple effect. So we actually have to slow down and make it really intentional so that we can offset the negativity bias.
Very well said, Dr. Tara. Very well said. Beautifully articulated. Let's talk about the science and psychology. How does practicing kindness physically affect our brains and bodies?
Well, as I mentioned briefly before, is when people practice something as simple as a loving kindness meditation. So, for example, loving kindness meditation comes from Eastern philosophies and traditions, and it's basically a prayer or a blessing that you say in rounds with words like, "May I be happy, may I be peaceful, may I find joy in the world." Those little tiny sayings that you repeat, and you direct those wishes to yourself, to a loved one, to your family, to a stranger, to the person that you might have difficulty with, and to all beings everywhere. And you can do this in a very small amount. And there's plenty of apps that have loving kindness meditation. But even 7 days of a practice of loving kindness meditation actually starts to enhance those networks in the brain, which I find so fascinating. Is that these little tiny microdoses of loving kindness meditation are really good for your health.
Definitely. Definitely. And how can kindness repair broken relationships or bridge divides, Dr. Tara?
Well, probably our biggest challenge in life is cultivating healthy relationships. And when we move forward in the world with giving people the benefit of the doubt, saying simple things around being, thankful, or I'm sorry, like a good apology can go a long way. When we practice these, we start to strengthen our bonds, which is so critical, right, for us to all get along. I mean, the world is not an easy place. We're always confronted with difficult things, but when we can wake up in the day and say, my intention today is to be kind, to open a door, to say something nice, to remember to say thank you to somebody. I feel like we forget to say thank you to each other.
Yes.
Um, right. And so, there's research to show that all of these things are beneficial, including gratitude practice, which I also write about in the book.
And Dr. Tara, how or can kindness be measured scientifically? If so, how?
Well, certainly I mean, well, there's so many different ways to assess it. Through surveys. There's been research studies showing what happens when people are assigned to do something nice for somebody else and the other person doesn't know it. Does it change how people feel about their life, their satisfaction, happiness? And the simple answer is yes. These things actually work for greater coherence. Research on relationships and marriages also show that really it's sort of like the secret ingredient is kindness and friendliness. That's what sustains romantic relationships over time. It's not all these other things that we might think about. It's really having, you know, is being nice to one another. And there's even a ratio, the 1 to 5 ratio. The Gottmans talk about this in some of their research of, you know, if your communication with someone that you care about has this ratio of 5 positives to 1 negative, those relationships and bonds are going to last. If it's the other way around, they won't. So it really speaks to us intentionally practicing the language of kindness. And, in my book, I come up with my own little terminology for this because I feel like we actually do have to see kindness like a language. And the only way that we can learn new languages is by practicing them, right?
Yes.
That's lived experience. So, one of my favorite words is kindfulness, which is being mindful, but making sure you're bringing in that heart quality and that heart energy to being mindful, because we can be aware and take that pause. But if we can add the compassion element to it, we're already bringing in that energy of, that heart energy. Um, the other word that I use often is kindsight, is that looking at our past experiences with kindness, because so many of us move through the world. I wish I had done that. I wish I didn't do that, or woe is me, or, they can't, people sometimes can't get over some really difficult things or losses that have happened. And so I try to help people look at these experiences from a place of compassion and kindness, and that's why I call it kindsight. It's like hindsight plus kindness,
Yes.
right? So that we can loosen the grip that the negativity has, um, you know, has just takes us over. So we need to kind of practice it more often.
Yes, kindfulness indeed. And Dr. Tara, as a clinical psychologist, perfectionism coach, as an author, what are your short term and long term goals?
Oh gosh. Well, my short-term goals, interestingly enough, when I first wrote The Kindness Cure in the United States, we were going through a very contentious election. And 8 years later, I updated the volume, and here we are again with in very similar circumstances. And it feels like there is a lot of negativity around us. So my short-term goal is to actually, I just say, put joy in the center of your life and go slowly, right? That's just like my short term day to day goal so that I can get through a day without feeling like I'm getting hijacked by the news. The long term goal for me is, recently, people were looking at all of the research on what, really contributes to happiness, like over 100 years. Like, what does the research say over 100 years of, what makes people satisfied and happy? It's relationships. So my long-term goal is to really just cultivate quality long-term relationships. I know that's what's going to matter in the end, and I really need to put in that attention now to make those sustainable over time.
Good luck to your goals. Dr. Tara, good luck and hoping for more and more success and create more books. Dr.
Oh,
Tara, that empower, truly empower people all over the world. And if you compare your debut book to your latest book, what the big difference?
well, I wasn't as scared to write the second book, The Perfectionist Dilemma. I think the first time you write a book, you think, oh, is what I'm going to write important enough? Hasn't it? Other people written the same thing before? And I had a very kind colleague say, yeah, Tara, but it's your version and it's your version that matters. So that was the lesson on the first one. But it was a struggle. I had to practice a lot of the things that I was teaching in this book. So it was also just like a lived experiment. So, there's 28 tips in there, and they're easy to read and they're easy to do. You just need to practice them. And The Perfectionist Dilemma, which just came out in January, it's almost like the next stage. The kindness here was really about doing kind acts for others, and I had a little bit of self-compassion in that book. The second book, The Perfectionist Dilemma, is really about learning how not to beat yourself up through the practice of self compassion. So the second book really turns the kindness back on to yourself.
Very well said, Dr. Tara. Very well said. And I hope you will have a third book regarding the combination of these books.
Oh, thank you. There's always things to write about, which is
Oh,
wonderful.
yes. Yes, indeed. And how can communities cultivate collective compassion in polarized times?
We need to reach out to each other. We can't hide, right? It's almost easier to avoid and hide. And I think this is the time when we really need to be turning towards our neighbors, reaching out to neighbors, checking in on each other, coming together for the values that you believe in, and speaking up and out. And so having allies really helps in these kinds of times.
Yes, you need to have an ally, people. And how can parents teach children about compassionate living in competitive world?
Yes, I think with parenting, kindness is something that is taught quite a bit in the earlier years. There's a lot of attention to social and emotional learning in classrooms, but we really need to role model it for, in our own households. And I think when, I did used to do a lot of talks on parenting actually when my daughters were smaller. It was just a natural, and really focusing on caring or kindness, consistency, and clarity on, consequences for unkind behavior, talking about it,
Yes.
role modeling it. I think sometimes the best things that parents can do, no matter what the age of a child, is to do things together, doing clothes drives or car washes to raise money, or working in a soup kitchen, or, collecting donations. I think when families do that together, it's very powerful because it instills those values early on.
Dr. Tara, what is the difference between healthy kindness and people pleasing?
Well, okay, I work with a lot of people pleasers.
Yes.
You know, I mean, who doesn't have some element of wanting to
Yes.
to please people, right? It's how we're kind, we're polite, but we just can't, be nice all the time. That can often come across as fake and inauthentic. Kindness is actually courageous because sometimes we actually have to say hard things,
Yes. Go
right?
ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So, there's like some nice phrases like, kindness is strong and kindness is clear, and it, you really just need to be honest and authentic and appropriate to the moment. But if you sort of sacrifice your own sense of self or identity and being kind all the time, um, it's not going to benefit you. In fact, what it will likely do is cause resentment and burnout. So we have to be mindful of that people pleasing part. And I talk about that also a lot actually in my second book, is that we all have parts in us. And when the people pleasing part comes up, it's a really good moment to say, why is this part of me coming forward? What is so important or scary about this situation that I feel like I have to be a people pleaser right now? So sometimes we just have to pay attention to when those parts get activated. They're normal. We just don't want them to take over all the time.
Yes. It's normal, people, not to please others.
Yeah.
And what is or how can workplace encourage kindness without sacrificing productivity?
Yeah, there's there's lots of things that can happen in the workplace. I say when it comes to the workplaces, it's really a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach. Like you have to do both. So leadership actually needs to have compassion and kindness in their work values. I feel like when companies don't actually have a more humanistic value, then there's trouble. And it really comes in these sort of in between moments. I often advise companies to see how they're doing their work meetings together, and if they can spend at least a few minutes on appreciations in work meetings, saying them out loud. And it's not just like picking, like, oh, this person did so great this week. Sometimes it's as simple as everyone going around the room and saying, one thing I appreciate today is, right? So that really becomes a culture of appreciation. And workplaces often will do things like runs together, or they'll have a cause, and that's all really important. But it can't just be one time a year. It's like, how do you make that a part of your daily life? And it really, comes down to people valuing it and talking about kindness and appreciation and gratitude on a regular, consistent basis.
Dr. Tara, very well said. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please to listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, and food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and mental health 101. Love letters in third season, and Movie 101 review and Music 101 in its fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. Dr. Tara, if readers take one action after finishing your book, what should it be?
I think they should pick a person that they really care about and tell them that they love them.
Yes, definitely. Kindness. The Kindness Cure by Dr. Tara. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your books, or any projects that you're doing right now?
Oh, absolutely. Listeners can come and check out my Substack called The Peaceful Perfectionist, where I write weekly articles and have meditations. They can find me on Insight Timer app and on my website at taracousineau.com.
Yes, people, let's support Dr. Tara Cousineau, because if you support her, for sure, more and more and more empowering books like this to come, more and more kindness to come, for sure. So, Dr. Tara, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
More to come, people. See you soon.